Excuse me, sir. Have you ever built a business in Japan before?
Business in Japan? Who
Yep.
told you that?
You look like a business guy, and I have a lot of people who want to know how to start business. Can I ask you just a few questions?
Time is short, but yeah, go ahead, fire away.
And today I'm here with
Jeff Crawford from Zo Digital Japan. We help foreign companies come into Japan with services like SEO and digital marketing.
Jeff. Why did you decide to start a business here in Japan?
Well, 25 years working in corporate stuff. And after that, I figured that's enough for me. I want to do my own thing. So started that about 10 years ago.
Mm. What was your experience like starting a business here in Japan?
It in the beginning, it wasn't very easy at all. So I would basically go to meetups, I'd go to different events, I'd hand out business cards, and I'd try to strike up conversations about people's websites.
So this was business cards before you had a business?
Yeah, basically,
Okay.
I was like Jeff Crawford, independent consultant. How can I help you?
So first you started a business as it sounds like a freelancer in Japan, and then you transitioned to establishing a business.
Yeah, you could call it a freelancer or consultant. Is
Mhm.
a popular phrase people use.
Mm.
But yeah, basically, I just go around and shake a lot of people's hands and
Mm.
say, what kind of help do you need with your website? How do you get traffic?
Mm.
How do you get customers? And just strike up conversations.
Got it. I mean, that's very forward as well. How did you decide that you were going to choose marketing as your form of business in Japan?
Mhm. Well, I've always had a passion for I come from a technical background, and
Mm.
I've always had a passion for, user experience and
Mm.
how users use computers or computing systems. And then later in life, I realized I was good at data. And
Mm.
so for me, like combining user experience and combining data
Mm.
is like really good. And so that's when
Mm.
after 25 years, I realized, oh, digital marketing is for me. So that's
And,
when I jumped into the field.
and you weren't doing digital marketing before.
I've had several paths of life. I
Okay.
started out as a developer in Silicon Valley.
Okay.
And then I got into customer support for a while
Mm.
and, management as well.
Mm.
So the ironic thing is all these things actually helped me form my business, right? I needed to
Mm.
understand technology. I needed to manage people,
Mm.
customer support, making clients or customers happy. All
Mm.
those things really helped.
Mm. I see. A lot of people here don't know how to get started when it comes to building a business in Japan. What were the first few steps that you took to get started here?
So first of all, you do a lot of research online, right? And I joined some communities, of people who start their own business, micropreneurs, I think was like a phrase that was popular at the time. But yeah, one is learned, study online,
Mm.
and two, being around the same kind of people,
Mm.
right? Whatever groups you can find.
Mm.
And three, I mean, the biggest one is I call it market testing, right?
Mm.
To me, it was going around, passing my business card and just asking them questions about what they're looking for.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
And then I realized, yeah, there's a lot of people that are unhappy with the performance of their websites in Japan.
Mm.
And I realized I could help.
Mm.
So, and I pivoted several times, right?
Mm.
I, in the beginning, I wanted to be just like a CRO agency focused on conversion. And then after that, I wanted to focus on ads. But eventually, I found my sweet spot, which is more SEO.
Why did you decide to leave Microsoft and Adobe to start your business here in Japan?
Mhm. So after 25 years, I had enough of big company stuff,
Mm.
the organizations, the relationships, the politics, the everybody's pigeonholed into a certain space.
Mm.
And it was enough for me. And honestly, I never quite fit with that environment.
Mm.
So I had this urge to strike off on my own, and that's what I did.
Microsoft and Adobe, I mean, they're big companies. You get a lot of benefits as well. Was it risky to leave that comfort to start your own business when there was no guarantee that it would work, especially in Japan?
Absolutely, I would say it was risky. And I think after I left my final corporate job, I would say I wandered the wilderness for about 2 years trying to figure out exactly what I want to do. No real income at the
Mm.
time. I think the hardest part was trying to convince my Japanese wife and her family
Mm.
that, hey, I still have a successful career and I'm going to make something out of it.
Mm.
So, you have to figure in that part as well.
Yeah. I mean, that there's so many angles I can go with that. There's a lot of people here who don't have, 2 years to be without consistent work to
Yes.
start their business. What advice would you give them?
Well, it depends, right? If you're a young person, right, and you can afford to take risks and live cheaply and follow your passion, I suspect you've done the same. Go ahead and do it. I mean, when you're in your 20s, I feel like you can do anything.
Mm,
In my case, it's a little bit different, right? I'm a little bit older, but I have experience.
mm,
So I was able to leverage my previous experiences in starting my own company.
mm,
So
mm.
I think, yeah, people who are older in life, right, 40s and 50s, uh, can can have that kind of benefit.
Mm, mm. For those who are older and watching this and they want to start a business in Japan, what specific advice would you be able to give them?
I think the biggest one for me would be start consulting, so to speak.
Mm,
Be in one man show, print your business cards, make a website that
mm,
highlights your services, and go around to different meetups, different events, um, and shake hands and start talking to people and see what they're interested in purchasing.
mm. There's a lot of people who are not good at networking. They're scared of people. How can they start a business in Japan if they're not good at networking?
Well, honestly, I was never good at networking either. So,
Okay.
so
So
there
how
you
did you do it?
go. you know, the thing is, you just ask a lot of questions,
Okay.
right? And I try not to talk about myself. It's all about the person I'm talking to. So if you ask explicit questions like, oh, how do you get customers? Oh, you get them through your website? Are you
Mm,
happy with your website? Have you done this? Have you done that? You ask these different types of questions and then you just listen. You
mm.
listen to what they say.
You said after leaving corporate life in Japan, you were
Mhm.
2 years trying to figure out what you wanted to do. What were the first couple of things that you noticed throughout that journey?
Well, uh, first, people would come up to me and I'd get requests. In my case, it's like, Jeff, help me with my analytics.
Mm,
Jeff, help me with my Google ad campaign.
mm,
Jeff, help me with Facebook.
mm,
So yeah, so I'd help them, and I'd charge them some small amount of money. I didn't care. I just
mm,
wanted the experience.
mm,
And then that started to balloon. And when I created the website, I noticed, wow, people are asking me for my help.
mm, mm,
And I started to get requests from what I would say credible overseas companies who
mm,
want to come into Japan. And that's what I realized I might have some traction here,
mm.
right? And that's what I focused on after that.
How were you able to get the reputation of Jeff, the analytics guy, when you got out of corporate life?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, you put it on your website, and I think the early websites, yeah, had a lot of Jeff the analytics guy in it, right? And honestly, it's really interesting. Jeff the analytics guy, people weren't so excited about that,
Mm,
so then I pivoted and then I was like Jeff the digital advertising guy. And
mm,
I got some requests, but I didn't really like the types of requests that we got.
mm.
So then I pivoted again, and then I became like Jeff, the SEO guy. And then boom, I got all these requests, the types of clients that I like.
Interesting.
And after that, the business grew.
That's so interesting because it shows the transition of the journey that you were doing, right? How did you know whether to stick with one thing out to the end versus, switching? Because you gave a few examples right now where you
Yeah.
switched. How were you able to determine when to switch and when to keep on with
Yeah.
one thing?
That's a tough question. And I think in the early days, I might have stuck with something a little bit too long.
Mm, mm.
We call it pivot,
Yeah.
right? That's a phrase you use. Um, so at some point, it, it might be more emotional than data driven,
Mm,
where you just realize either I'm not getting requests that I like, right?
mm,
That's a good fit for me. And then you say, well, okay, maybe I'll try something else.
mm,
Like I said, the whole time I'm going to meetups, I'm shaking people's hands,
mm,
and then saying, you know, Jeff, I'm Jeff the analytics guy. I
mm,
switched to Jeff the digital advertising guy.
Mm-mm.
And then, yeah, that didn't work. And okay, I'm going to try Jeff, the SEO people. Oh, we're
Mm.
looking for a really good partner and somebody that can help us over the next 2 years. I'm like, great, that sounds like us.
Interesting.
So,
Interesting.
yeah, you just try different things and you see what kind of responses that you get.
How important is it for foreigners to learn Japanese in order to start a business in Japan?
Okay, so my answer to that is it depends who your customer is. If you're solely selling directly to Japanese businesses, Japanese people, you better have a pretty good command of the Japanese language.
Mm.
In my case, most of my clients are overseas companies who want to come into Japan.
Mm.
So in many cases, my clients are overseas companies.
Mm.
So I don't have to worry about that as much, although I
Mm.
still got Japanese customers and clients that we talked about.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
So yeah, it all depends.
Have you faced any failures in your business? And if so, how did you bounce back up?
I don't know if I would call them failures, but we can call it adversity and things like that. So one example is COVID, right?
Mm.
So that dropped what, February or March or 2020,
Mm.
and I immediately lost 3 clients. And it's like, ooh, okay. But we kept working at it, and during COVID, a number of companies got online religion, so to speak, and
Mm.
so very quickly we were able to replace those clients.
I see.
But we are at the whims of the global economic situation. So if there's like a downturn, and there has been, right, that affects us disproportionately over
Mm.
other industries.
Mm. So in Japan, how did you know when to stick with just one niche versus pivoting to another one?
Well, first of all, it's a really hard question, and sometimes it can be data driven. You can use data to like realize, oh, geez, I'm not getting any customers in
Mm.
this niche. Or sometimes it's emotional, like how passionate are you about the niche?
Mm.
Or sometimes you just have to realize, oh, this isn't going to work out long term.
Mm.
So then you make the pivot.
How did you realize that it was appropriate time for you to make that pivot?
Yeah. So I think it turns out it's probably more emotional. You have to analyze your own skills, your own
Mm.
strengths, and your own passion,
Mm.
and then make a decision. Like I said before, in the beginning, I wanted to be like the analytics conversion
Mm.
optimization guy. But the reality is, people weren't requesting that service.
Mm. So how did you get into analytics in the first place?
I just loved it.
Mm.
I love the idea of looking at a website and
Mm.
saying, what are customers doing with this website? Where are
Mm.
they falling off? Where are they going? Which ones are happy? Why are they falling off this page?
Mm.
And so that kind of stuff requires data and it requires analysis. And that's just something I enjoy doing.
Got it.
Kind of weird, isn't it? But that's what I
Ev-
enjoy.
Everyone has their own thing,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay, very good. So specifically as a foreigner, right? What were the challenges of building a business in Japan as a foreigner?
There are quite a few. Um, First of all, there's all the logistics of just establishing a company in Japan. Luckily, I had some help in the beginning from a Japanese person.
Mm.
So that was a help. But later on, I had to go and figure it out on my own.
Mm.
There's like establishing the company, there's getting a bank account,
Mm.
there's figuring in my case, figuring out how to take overseas payments into Japan.
Okay.
Sounds so simple, but it was quite complicated at the time. And I think the Japanese aspect of it too is um, Japanese tend to trust big, well-known companies
Mm.
and less so upstart companies, especially run by a foreigner. And you need to do extra work just to establish trust.
Mm. What's an example of extra work to establish trust here in Japan?
Well, the first, I'll say, real Japanese client that I got,
Mm.
I talked to the CEO, and he was just pretty blatant. He's like, "Well, I don't know if I can trust you, but let's see if this works. And are you
Mm.
just like all those other guys, or are you you
Mm.
going to actually do something?" And then over the course of the next 2 months, I doubled his traffic. And
Mm.
so after that, he trusted me a lot more.
I see.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you say about that. So, do foreigners in Japan who try to start a business here, do they have a bad stigma around them?
Um, I don't know because I can only talk for myself. But I think it's an extra challenge that you're going to have to
Mm,
build trust,
mm,
um, that a Japanese person may not have. I think a Japanese person would always feel more comfortable doing business with another Japanese person.
mm,
However, they realize, especially if their business deals with overseas or foreigners in some way, they realize that they have to work with a foreigner, and
mm,
then they're more accepting of that.
mm. Okay. What are some of the misconceptions of starting a business here in Japan?
Ooh, um, I would say maybe some people expect instant growth.
Mm,
You got to be here for the long haul. Takes a long time to establish relationships in Japan and get things moving. So don't expect any grandiose results in like the first 3, 4, 5 years that
mm.
you do it.
So, when can people expect to? I know it depends on the business, but when can people expect to get a profit here in Japan once they start their business?
Well, it all depends on the negotiations and the relationships that you do. I think consulting, you can get a positive ROI fairly early,
Mm,
although you may not ever get back to what you made as a salary.
mm,
Someone living here in Tokyo. For me personally, it took many years, like what 4 or 5 years, before I got back to the point where I was making income that matched my salary working at the big companies.
wow.
Mhm.
Well, that's a long time. Yeah. Is that pretty standard?
I have no idea.
Okay.
It all depends on your niche and
Mm,
what you're interested in. In my case, it's consulting, it's starting an agency, I'm
mm,
self-funded,
mm,
right?
mm,
Someone who's like starting a company with venture capital might be a completely different
mm.
situation.
I see. There's a lot of people here who want to start a business in Japan, but they don't know what type of business to start. What would you recommend?
Uh, my first vote would be just start off doing consulting, whatever
Okay.
your specialty is. Print it out in your business card, make a
Mm,
website that highlights your talents and your services and your experiences.
mm.
And I would do the same as me, go around and pass business cards and ask people about their problems.
Perfect. Jeff, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Great talking to you.